Good morning and welcome to another exciting episode of your favorite podcast, Altered. We meet every Monday and Friday to talk about different aspects of life. We discuss a lot of stuff from Bible, but our intention is only one, and that is that we are able to encourage you that you bring your life as a living sacrifice at the altar of God and let Him alter you. I hope that because of what we have spoken here, what we have discussed here, you can look back and say, well, God has really used this and altered me. No matter what your situation is or has been, no matter where you are, matter what you have done, just give God a chance, because His word and His altar is very much capable of handling you, transforming you, and use everything for His glory. Anyway, let's move on. So, last week, not last week, sorry, in our last episode on Monday, we did an elaborate discussion on our new series, and that is Legends and Lessons. You know, that even legends have some lessons to give us, not only through their strengths, but also through their weaknesses. So we discussed elaborately, we discussed the strengths of King David, and also his failures, and the only reason for us to do that is, for me wanting to do that, is that for me and for everybody who's watching, we are able to bring out a more human side of these iconic biblical characters. So that we are able to understand that it's not out of reach to become a David in towards today's time. That perfection is not the way to go. All of them have had their weaknesses. All of them have had their failures, their insufficiencies. And yet, through all of that, God worked in their lives. And their name is recorded in the greatest book ever written in the history of this universe, and that is Bible. So our today's, I'm a feminist. I'm sure I have repeated this a lot of times being on this podcast. So today we are going to talk about, in our lessons and in Legends and Lessons, we are going to talk about one of my gosh, I'm in awe of this woman, Queen Esther. Wow, it's like King David. Now we have moved on to Queen Esther. Before we dive into her strength and her weaknesses per se, let me just set a little bit of background for you. And so Queen Esther was not always a queen. She became a queen at a very young age after King Ahasuerus decided to let go of his previous queen, Queen Vashti, and said that, I need a new queen. And Esther was a beautiful woman raised by her cousin Mordecai, and Mordecai brought her, and she did not have much of a choice, because it was a patriarchal rule, patriarchal society. She had to step into the role of the queen, and she hid her identity of being a Jew, which later is going to play a very important role in her life and in her calling that God had placed upon her life. So that was the plot. Even though in the middle of so many issues with God's people, Jews, she entered the palace of the king, became an influential woman, and during her reign as the queen of Persia, what were her strengths and what were her probable weaknesses that probably, we might have at this point of time also, and we can dig into those weaknesses as well and let God use them, let God change us. So the first strength of Queen Esther was her courage. Wow, I love that. I always say that the power of doing the right thing always amplifies, especially if you are putting at stake a lot to lose. Okay, let me repeat it. If you're at a place of influence and you have a lot of materialistic blessings and you have a position that you're holding on to, and And in the middle of all of that, if you're supposed to do something that is right, and it might cost you everything that you have, it might strip you off of your position, it might strip you off of your reputation, it might strip you off of your materialistic blessings, are you still going to do the right thing? The way Queen Esther did it. You know, there is a beautiful definition. As I said earlier, one of her strength was courage. There's a beautiful definition of courage that I learned when I was newly saved. I kept asking God, what is courage? Is courage something like when I enter a room, everybody is scared of me? People are scared of, you know, I was working at a good position in one of a very well-known, MNCs. If I'm a courageous leader, if I'm a courageous person, does it mean that everybody should be afraid of me, opening their mouths in front of me? Should I have that kind of hold or command on the room that I am probably training in or speaking for or doing a presentation? But something God taught me was that courage is not any of that. Courage is holding on to your beliefs, holding on to your identity, despite of whatever situation you are in, despite of your suffering, despite of your troubles, despite of situations that come against you, especially challenging your identity and your purpose. And that's exactly the kind of courage that Queen Esther showed. She knew that if she goes to the king without being invited, without taking an appointment, she's going to rush into his presence and say, you know what, I want to invite you for a great meal, you know, in my palace or whatever space you have given me rightfully as a queen, you know. It might lead to her execution. It might lead to a big punishment. She might get stripped off of her position. But she said in Esther 2:14, let me look at the reference here. If I am correct, I hope I'm correct. I'm trying to learn these references. Yeah, it is. Come on, I hope I'm going to win. No, I'm sorry. It was Esther 4:16. She said, if I perish, I perish. Those 5 words show a woman embracing risk for a cause greater than herself. She did not turn into a person who said, well, who did not count her cost, or she actually did count the cost. You know, she actually said, you know what, even if I'm stripped off, even if I'm thrown out of the palace, even if I lose all of this luxury, this comfort, this position, this big crown that I have on my head, I don't care. I'm going to do the right thing. And if I perish, I perish. So that's what I want to ask you today. Taking the reference from Queen Esther's life, wherever you are in your life, are you going to stand up for what's right? Despite of the risk, despite of you losing your popularity probably, you know. I want to give an example from my life. When I was working with the organization as a senior trainer, as a training officer, it was hard. It was very hard. And don't get me wrong, my colleagues are one of the most amazing people I've worked with. So supportive, so loving, so kind-hearted. I mean, like God had really blessed me through my colleagues in that season of my life. But there is a culture that the world follows, and that is always talking behind people's back, making fun of people's misery. You have to talk nonsense about your boss. You know, making fun of women, calling women name, you know, body shaming, cuss words against men and women. So I would sit with them. Whenever I would sit with them, I had to take a stand. And if they were talking bad against somebody else or they were hurt, I would not open my mouth. And that actually made me lose a lot of popularity. Even if I had any, I wasn't sure. They were like, oh, she's so religious. She's just very spiritual. She's somebody who's all about, she's very strict. She's very rigid. People kind of liked me a little less because of that. Oh, she's not going to say anything. She's not coming out with us for that night out. She's not going to be coming out with us with that 3-day trip. I took a stand for something that I believed God sees as right. You know, I would say, I'm sorry, if you have a problem with the boss, if you have a problem with the manager, who's leading us, respectfully, you can go and talk to him. You can go and tell him that, sir, this is the problem. And you know, I understand that your friends went. You know, that's once in a blue moon situation if they're really hurt. But that conversation for entertainment, that conversation for ruining somebody's reputation, you know, for ruining somebody's image, that's something that I never participated in. And as I said earlier, it costed me. So I'm going to ask you this, wherever you are in your life, you know, Are you taking a stand for God? Are you taking a stand for a generation that is coming behind you? Setting an example for Christians in your workplace, at your home, in your office, in your church, in your ministry. I've actually said this to a worship leader in a church the church I've saved at. She was talking some stuff about another worship leader to me and making fun of him. And I could see a lot of bitterness in her heart. And I said, I understand that you're very upset with him, but I want to remind you that he's your brother in Christ. And if there is any issue that you have with him, as much as I am willing to give you a listening ear and I want to create a safe space for you, I want to encourage you that you should go and talk to him directly. Maybe there is a version of story of his side of the story, and yeah, and it has again costed me like, oh, you're too righteous. What do you think? You're better than us. But in my heart, my intention was not to be better than anybody else. My heart was to be courageous for God, for his people. And same was with Esther. So today I want to ask you a question. Are you putting everything on stake and being courageous for God? Now let's move on to the second strength of Queen Esther. This is something that we all super duper fail at. And that is relying on God's wisdom and strategy. Even though Queen Esther knew everything about the plan of Jews might get assassinated, or the Jews might get killed, she didn't quickly tell everything to the king. What she did was she relied on God and fasted for 3 days and asked everybody else to do it too. And after that, she relied on a strategy that I am hoping and I'm assuming, and that was shared, was released to her, was revealed to her by God, that this is how you are supposed to inform the king. The king assesses that this is what this guy is trying to do. This is what and then reveal her identity to the king. How beautiful is that? She did not rush into a decision. We do that a lot. There's something that I've learned, something my husband taught me. I was the person who would say, well, you know what, whatever is in my heart, I just say it. That makes me so honest. That makes me so brave. But I learned with time, there is wisdom in concealing information. There's wisdom in not revealing everything. Because, again, this is written in the book of Proverbs, and another book of Bible says that there is a time for everything. There's a season for everything under the sun. And because of her reliance on God, she understood. God told her, God showed her, God gave her that wisdom, that how this whole series of events have to progress. Even though she had the courage to be like, you know what, if I have to perish, I'll perish. That's fine. She had that courage. But that courage also made her step back and say, I'm going to rely on God for this. God is with me. God is going to be with us. God doesn't want his people to perish. And I'm willing to risk everything for the sake of God and his people. But I am also going to move forward only by the counsel of people. And she decided to rely on God. She decided, and that is why, what she actually did was that she approached the king with a plan. She invited him and Haman to a banquet, not once, but twice, before revealing Haman's plot. Her approach shows patience, wisdom, and she was quite a political savvy. She understood timing and human behavior, and she used that to save her people. How amazing is that? So my friends, if you're in a position of influence, if you're in a position of power, and if you have the passion and the courage to go after God's ways, to go after God's purpose, to go after God's calling, I want to remind you, do not do it alone. Do not do it on your own. Rely on God for wisdom, for strategy, for guidance, for revelations. And you see how God will subdue your enemies, how God is going to give you the promised land that he has promised to you. Again, in the book of Psalms, it says that God says, only if my people would obey me, only if I'll be able to subdue their enemies. So only because Esther obeyed God, Esther relied on God. We all know we cannot obey God unless we rely on him for strength, unless we rely on him and strengthen ourselves in the grace he has given to us in his son, Christ Jesus. Our enemies cannot be subdued. How? Wow, wow, so beautiful. Now let's move on to her weaknesses. And we are discussing these weaknesses, as I said earlier, just to bring her humanity into picture. So let's discuss her weaknesses quickly. Her feast, her, her, sorry, her first initial weakness was her initial fear and reluctance. When Mordecai asked Esther to take a stand, intervene, she hesitated. She was hesitant. Her fear was valid that she might. She tried to avoid the responsibility at first, but when Mordecai said, "You know what? You never know that you have been given this position, you have been made the queen for times like this," it was like a wake-up call for her. That was her initial weakness. That showed that even though she was a king, she kind of had become really comfortable wherever she was. She was like, I'm a Jew, I've become a queen, I don't need to worry much. But she responded. Her spirit responded to the teachability. So you might be in a season in your life where you're very happy with wherever you are. You don't want to move. You don't want to take a stand. But maybe, and that might be your weakness at this point of time, and it is condemning you. What can I do for God? How can I move forward? This is your sign. I want to remind you, let this conversation today with me change you and let you move and push you and remind you that you have been called for times like these. And second, this might not be a very valid weakness, but it is just something that struck me while I was studying this book. And that is that Queen Esther was a woman of valor. Of course, she was a woman who was teachable, woman who relied on God. And despite of that fact, despite of all these amazing traits that she had, and the great position that she had as a queen of Babylon, her influence was limited. If we see at the end of the book of Esther, Mordecai had most of the influence after that. So that showed that she acted only when she was pushed, and when she needed this external stimulus, this external agitation to be pushed into working up, into working out all these great stuff, all this courage, this wisdom, this strategy, this position, this calling that God had put in her. She had to be in a crisis to act upon that. And that is why I personally feel that even though probably Esther could have had Esther 1, Esther 2, Esther 3, Esther 4, just like it was for First King for David and First Samuel for David and Second King for David. There were so many books about the life of David. There should have been way many more books on the life of Queen Esther, because of how amazing she was as a Jew, how amazing she was as a woman, how amazing she was and what an amazing calling she had, and what an amazing, she never had to fight for her position, just like how David had to. She was just picked up and put in the place of a queen. It came, I'm assuming, quite easy to her, but her influence was limited. I really wish that she did not exercise all these amazing things God had put in her just at the time of crisis. And I was hoping that we had much more to learn from her life. So another probably a weakness of Queen Esther, which we can learn from her, is that do not use what God has put in you only when you are agitated from outside, or only when things are going south in your life. Use them every day. Exercise your faith every day. Exercise your power every day. Exercise your authority every day to influence whatever comes into contact with you. Exercise your spirit of love. You don't only have to show love to people when they are at their worst. You can just show love by smiling at people around you, by saying thank you to people, by being there for smallest of things in your church or in your community. Are you known as somebody who is going to go out of their way to show up for people, even before people ask you, even without people asking you for help? So that your influence is not only limited to the situation of crisis. Having said that, I totally believe that Queen Esther was one of the most amazing, iconic characters that ever lived. And through her life, we learn that courage is not absence of fear. Courage is not absence of unfavorable situations. Courage is showing up despite of unfavorable situations, and that God always shows up. And there is nothing we can do the way God wants us to do unless we do not rely on Him. So if this was a blessing for you, if you have any questions, any suggestions, any comments, we would love to hear from you. And I hope that this conversation was a great blessing from you. And again, once again, if you are in a position of any even little bit of influence, use it right now. Act upon it right now. And God is going to use you, and you have been placed wherever you are for times like these. See you next time. Until then, stay blessed. Let God alter you. Bye-bye.